Now, I'll take another of these assumptions now, that memories are stored inside the brain. Now, this is something that not just scientists take for granted, but most people take for granted. If you just ask the average person you meet on the street, where are memories? They'd say, oh, in your head. It's just a standard assumption of our whole culture. It's where a scientific assumption has spread through the whole culture and is taken for granted. Now, where's the evidence that memories are in our head? Well, many people would say you don't need any evidence. It's obvious. They've got to be there. Where else could they be? Some people say, well, you might have tissue memory, muscle memory, etc., but it's still physically located in the body. It's got to be there. How else could it possibly work? This is an assumption. There are actually alternatives. And the idea that memories are stored in the brain has been questioned by philosophers for centuries. Plotinus, in his theory of the soul, thought that memories were an aspect of the soul, not of the body, and were not stored in the brain. Henri Bergson, the great French philosopher, in his book Matter and Memory, provided a persuasive argument that memories are not stored in the brain. There's another kind of causation, a causation across time, which can carry memories across time without them being stored in brains. Bertrand Russell, the British philosopher, agreed with Bergson, and he proposed that there was a new kind of causation that he called mnemic causation, a kind of causation that works, is the basis of memory, that leaps across time, connecting similar things across time. Ludwig Wittgenstein came to the conclusion that memory was not stored in the brain. He was one of the most influential philosophers in the English-speaking world in the 20th century. My own view is that memory depends on morphic resonance. Morphic resonance is a kind of resonance across time from similar patterns of activity in the past to similar patterns in the present. That's the postulate of the theory. It's a resonance theory of memory. And what the resonance theory of memory would say is that memory depends on a kind of resonance with the past. When you meet somebody you haven't seen for a while and you recognize them, you resonate with yourself in the past, the last time you saw them. And there's a resonance across time that gives you that feeling of recognition. You know you've seen them before. It's not, in the meantime, stored inside your brain. There isn't a kind of copy of their face somewhere embedded in your nervous system. That memory may depend on the resonance process, not on physical storage inside the brain. Well, what about the evidence? For 100 years, people have been trying to find the putative memory traces inside brains. In the 1950s, there was a determined attempt to find these by Carl Lashley here in the United States, who trained rats and monkeys to learn a wide variety of tricks. Once they'd learned the trick, he cut out bits of their brain to find out where the memories were stored. And to his surprise, he found that he could cut out large amounts of the brain. It didn't matter which amount, right, left, front, back, upper, lower. He could cut out large chunks of the brain without destroying the memory. Of course, if you remove the whole brain, the animal couldn't behave anymore, so you couldn't detect what was going on in terms of memory. But you could cut out large amounts of the brain, and these animals, after they recovered from the operation, could still remember. He came to the conclusion that memory seemed to be both everywhere and nowhere in particular. It couldn't be localized. His student, Karl Pribram, took this idea further with his idea of the holographic storage of memories, that they're stored like a hologram over large regions of the brain. Since then, there have been further determined efforts to find memories, either in modified nerve endings, in phosphorylated proteins, or in other molecular mechanisms. Over and over again, they've drawn a blank. We know that when memories are laid down, there's activity in certain regions of the brain, particularly the hippocampus. And when the memories are retrieved, there's activity in the brain that can be detected by brain scans. But in between, they just seem to disappear. Now, does this make people think, are they really there? No. They just say, we haven't found out where they are yet. We need a few billion more dollars, and we'll have another determined attempt to find them. But you see, there may be a very simple reason for this repeated failure. After billions and billions and billions of dollars have been spent, millions of man-hours expended on this quest, the reason that they can't find them may be very simple. They may not be there. It may be rather like coming to your house and trying to find what programs you watched last night on television. Did you watch Obama's acceptance speech? Can I find out by analysing the transistors and wires in your TV set? No, I can't, because it doesn't leave a trace in the TV set. That's not how TV works. It tunes in. It doesn't store. It's not a video recorder. It's a receiver. I think our brains are much more like receivers than recording devices. And of course, if you damage a receiver, you can damage the ability to retrieve memory. If I came and damaged the sound circuit of your TV set, I could make your TV set aphasic. It wouldn't speak. But that wouldn't prove that all the sounds that come out of the TV set are originating inside that bit of the TV set or that they're stored there. Similarly, brain damage through injuries, stroke, or degenerative diseases like Alzheimer's doesn't prove, if the memory is lost, that the memory is stored in the damaged or decaying tissue. It merely shows that this is affecting the ability to retrieve the memory. So it turns out that memory storage in the brain is an extremely open question. The evidence actually favours a resonance theory because of the failure of repeated attempts to find traces in brains. The reason, it also explains a lot more. Morphic resonance depends on similarity. We're all similar to lots of people in the past, especially members of our own family. And it would explain what Jung called the collective unconscious, a collective memory on which we all draw. But the reason we have our own memories is because we're more similar to ourselves in the past than we are to anyone else. If I ask you who's most similar to you in the past, the answer has to be you. You're more similar to yourself 10 years ago, 20 years ago, a day ago, than you are to anyone else. And that's why you have your own memories and not other people's. From this point of view, individual memory and collective memory are different in degree, not in kind. Whereas the conventional theory would say collective memory doesn't really exist, or it's just a cultural inheritance that is not at all what Jung was saying. It's, and individual memory is stored somewhere in the brain in as yet unidentified brain traces. So I think the resonance theory explains the facts better. So this is an open question. I'm not saying I'm definitely right about this, and so is Bergson, Bertrand Russell, and Ludwig Wittgenstein, and Plotinus. I'm saying that there's a long tradition of thought of looking at memory in a different way, and the evidence favours this alternative way as opposed to the trace theory. And yet 100% of research on memory, paid for by NIH and other funding bodies to the tune of billions of dollars a year, is based on the unquestioned assumption it's got to be in the brain. There's no other alternative that you can discuss within that framework of thought. Any discussion it's not in the brain is taboo. Then we come to the assumption that the mind is in the brain. The mind is the brain. Mental activity is brain activity. This says that everything you experience is somehow inside your head. But is it? We've all been brought up with that assumption. It's something that ordinary people, even in ordinary conversation, say. If they say it's in my mind, they often say it's in my head. It's an assumption that runs through our entire civilization, and which we're now busy spreading to the rest of the world through modern scientific education. So, is it true? Well, I think if you think about vision just as a starting point, it's fairly easy to see that when you think about it, it just collapses as an assumption. Think of what happens during vision, e.g. you seeing me now. We all know the scientific explanation. Light's reflected from me, travels through the electromagnetic field, enters your eyes, inverted images on your retinas, changes in the cone cells, impulses up the optic nerve, and activity in different regions of the brain, the optical cortex and elsewhere. So far, so good. We know more details about that than anyone's ever known before. But is that an explanation of vision? No, it's just a description of the changes that happen in your nervous system and in your eyes. How does that explain the conscious experience of seeing? Well, the answer to that is it doesn't. That none of this explains consciousness at all, which is why the mere existence of consciousness is called the hard problem by philosophers of mind. So then, what might be going on? Well, where are these images located? The usual assumption is that your nervous system mysteriously generates a virtual reality display in full color and 3D inside your head, and that's what you're experiencing. Well, that's quite a stretch. No one's ever seen a virtual reality display inside a head. But let's just stay with this conventional view for a while. That means that when you see me standing here now, your image of me isn't located where it seems to be. It's inside your head. There's a little Rupert somewhere inside your head. And if you look at the sky, then the sky you're seeing is inside your head too. Your image of the sky is inside your brain. There was a seminal paper on this subject published in a leading journal recently called "Is Your Skull Beyond the Sky?" And the author of the paper concluded, yes, of course it must be, because everything you experience is inside your brain. So your skull is beyond the sky. Everything you experience is inside your head. The head you seem to experience that seems to be there is just a visual illusion produced as part of the virtual reality display, because the real skull is outside your whole realm of experience. That, believe it or not, is the official view, taken to its logical extreme. The view I'm putting forward, by contrast, is so simple that it's hard to grasp. I'm suggesting your image of me is located right here. It's in your mind, but not inside your brain. Vision involves an inward movement of light and an outward projection of images. That everything you see in the world around you is projected out. Your mind extends far beyond your brain. If you look at a distant star, it extends out of literally over astronomical distances. So the projection of the mind in every act of perception is something that's not confined to humans. I think that's the way all image-forming eyes work. The world is full of invisible visual projections of other people, of animals, of birds, of insects. Just as this room is full of invisible electromagnetic radiations carrying cell phone messages, TV and radio programs, so when you go outdoors on a nice bright day like today was in San Francisco, the world is filled with these visual projections from all these creatures that are seeing the world, not just humans. Now, this is not a new theory of vision, and I claim no originality for it. It's what Plato taught, it's what the ancient Greeks believed, it's what Euclid had as his basis of his optical theory of vision. It's the way in which he explained mirror images. The reason you see things behind a mirror, the virtual images, is because when you project out your image, being mental projections, they're not bent by the glass, they go straight through it, and you create these images behind the mirror. That's still the theory in physics textbooks today. It's basically based on the idea of an outward projection of images. Most children under the age of 10 believe that the eye projects out images. Jean Piaget, the developmental psychologist, found that under the age of 10, most European children believe that vision involves an outward projection as well as an inward movement of light. However, Piaget said, rather pleased with himself, that by the age of 10 or 11, the average child learns the correct view, which is that thoughts and images are invisible things located inside the head. Now, most of us have taken that on trust, but no one's ever seen a thought or an image inside a head. All they've seen is electrical changes in brain activity. So, is this just a philosophical question, or can it be tested? Now, as some of you already know, this is something I've devoted some time to, because if your mind reaches out to touch what you're looking at, you should be able to affect what you're looking at just by looking at it. If it's another person, if you look at them from behind, through a window, they can't hear you, they can't smell you, they can't see you, they don't know you're there by any other means. Can they feel your gaze? Well, as soon as you ask that, you realize this is a common experience. Most people have had the feeling of being stared at and have felt when people are looking at them from behind. I've done lots of experiments. Some of these experiments are so simple a child can do them, and in fact thousands of children already have done them. They've been done in primary schools and secondary schools in Britain, Germany, and throughout the state of Connecticut. These experiments have given consistent, repeatable results. People can tell above chance when they're being stared at. This experiment's also been running in the Amsterdam Science Museum, the NEMO Center, for 15 years now. Tens of thousands of people have taken part. It's one of the biggest experiments ever done. The results are overwhelmingly positive and statistically significant. The sense of being stared at seems to be real. Yet regular science can't explain it at all, and it's treated as a completely taboo or paranormal topic outside the remit of conventional science. It's not mentioned in regular psychology courses except dismissed as a superstition or an illusion that the uneducated are prone to believe in because they haven't learned a proper scientific theory of vision. Yet, ordinary people may be completely right about this. I think it's a very fundamental ability. Most animals have it too. I think it probably evolved a very long time ago in the context of predator-prey relationships. A prey animal that could tell when a hidden predator was looking at it would tend to escape better than one that couldn't. And so I think this is very fundamental, very basic. It's found all over the world. Over 90% of people have experienced it. And it fits with a theory of vision that doesn't confine it all to the inside of the head. For that reason, it's completely taboo within science. And yet, it seems to happen. It's not expensive to do this research, and it's in fact very interesting. So I think the idea that the mind is confined to the brain, this is one line of argument that I think is persuasive in showing that the mind isn't confined to the inside of the head. The same theory is taken to mean that all our sensations of our body are in our brain. If I feel a pain in my toe, the pain isn't in my toe, it's in my brain. And it's referred to my toe in a rather unexplained way. What I'm saying is that just as my image of you is where it seems to be, namely outside me and where you're sitting, if I feel a pain in my toe, that pain is in the toe. It's not inside my brain. The brain may play a part, it does play a part in the sensation of pain and registering it, but the sensation is not in the brain. So I don't think our body image or our images of the external world are all in our brain. I think brains are grossly overrated, just as genes are grossly overrated, because people have tried to cram everything into brains, all perceptions, all thoughts, all sensations, all visual perception, all memory has been crammed into the brain. But the brain just doesn't do that. It's not what it's doing. It's working in some quite different way. Just as people have tried to cram all hereditary information into the genes, I think a lot of it's conveyed by morphic resonance. I'll talk more about that tomorrow in relation to biological inheritance. Well, I think this is enough to show that I've only dealt with 3 of the dogmas this evening, and only with part of them at that. But this just gives you a flavour. And when you look at these dogmas in a critical scientific way, it turns out that they're, as hypotheses, they're not supported by the evidence. Better hypotheses are possible. This doesn't mean that the whole of science collapses and Western civilization falls into ruins. It means science gets more exciting, more interesting, and we can ask new questions. It'll be more fun. And how might science move forward? Well, there are 2 ways I think that are really important. I think the first is something that we can all play a part in. The world of professional science is full of people who've had psychic experiences, who have religious beliefs and practices, spiritual practices, who go to alternative practitioners and so forth. They're not all scientific fundamentalists and true believing materialists. Such people exist, and Richard Dawkins has done us all a favour by crystallizing those views and making them fully explicit. This is certainly a point of view. Many scientists are actually not paid-up materialists who feel a deep need to believe in this worldview. They go along with it in public because not to do so would damage their career. It's a bit like communism in Russia under Brezhnev. How many people actually believed in the theories of communism? In public, many of them gave lip service to them. When party leaders made speeches, tens of thousands of people were clapping in unison in these huge halls of the people. But did that mean they really believed it? No. When communism collapsed, how many were true believers in communism? A few, there were certainly some, but it wasn't a majority. And I think that's true in science today. Another factor that's important here is that the demographics of science are changing dramatically. Last year, 2.5 million people in India graduated with science and engineering degrees. 1.5 million in China, 500,000 in the US, 100,000 in Britain. And of those who, at the graduate level in the US and in Britain, of those people, a third were Asian. They were Indian, Chinese, and Korean. The majority of young scientists today are not from white, European, and American backgrounds. They're Asian, and they have no reason to believe in this inherited baggage of the materialist worldview which has come to us through the European history of science for a variety of reasons. They have no reason to buy into that at all. They do so at work, or pretend to do so, because they know it would damage their career not to. I think one of the things that would change science most is if scientists felt the ability to come out to their colleagues and talk about what they really experience and what they're really interested in. This occurred to me most forcefully when I gave a seminar in Cambridge on some of my work on dogs that know when their owners are coming home. There were 6 scientists in this small seminar, and they were all interested in the results. They talked about it politely. They were very non-committal in the official question period. They asked about the statistics, the methodology, and so on. But afterwards, one by one, they came up and they said to me, you know, I've always been interested in this kind of thing. It's one reason I went into this in the first place. And another would come up, look around during the tea break. If no one was listening, he said, you know, I've got a dog that does this right now. You know, when I go home from the lab, it's waiting for me at the door. When all 6 had told me they thought this was happening, and when all 6 had said the same thing to me, but I can't talk about it to my colleagues because they're all so straight, I said to them, why don't you guys come out? You'd have so much more fun. And I think this is the way forward within the sciences. I think there's so many people there who have spiritual interests, psychic experiences and so forth, that don't or can't talk about them to their colleagues. If they do so, they'll find that many of their colleagues share these interests, and the conversation in the laboratory tea room would become so much more interesting than it is at present. And these kinds of bigger questions I'm talking about would become part of the scientific debate rather than being marginalized and kept in taboo areas where if scientists talk about them at all, they do it with their colleagues after a few glasses of wine with trusted friends in the evenings. I know that the scientific world is full of people who don't believe this because since I've been out for decades, scientists feel quite free to talk to me. And since my book, The Science Delusion, came out in Britain, I've been receiving emails from eminent British scientists in different branches of science and medicine telling me about their views, and some of them asking to meet me to discuss this. I've been having a series of clandestine meetings with eminent scientists. And for good reasons, they explain to me why they can't let their colleagues know what their true views are. And for one or two, the price is very heavy. They'll lose their grants, they won't get their papers published in high citation peer-reviewed journals, they won't get tenure or promotion. There's a big price to pay for breaking these taboos. But if enough people do it, it would be like gays and the gay liberation movement. It would be empowering, mutually empowering. And it would just make science so much more fun and much more attractive to young people. Right now, it really puts off a lot of bright young people because they see it as just a load of dry facts you've got to learn. If they were aware that lots of questions are truly open, I think it would be a very different situation.